Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Comic Books Transformed. I am here with my good friend Brian, who's also the co-host. Brian, welcome. How you doing tonight?
Doing good, Pete.
Guys, on Comic Books Transformed, in case you're new here, we talk about shows and movies that are based upon some of our favorite comic book properties. And we cover quite a few MCU shows that are on Disney Plus. Tonight, we are talking about episodes 1 and 2 of What If, which is the brand new show, the first animated MCU show. And so, since Brian, we watched both episodes, out of the two, what if Peggy Carter was the first Avenger, or what if T'Challa had become Star-Lord? Which one did you like better?
Hands down, easy pick. What if T'Challa became Starlord?
Okay. I completely agree, and I also feel, hands down, that one is way better.
Yeah,
So,
I was much more pleasantly surprised with this episode than the
okay.
first one. Yeah.
So yeah, let's go into. Let's hear why episode 2 over episode 1.
Episode 2 actually did something different. It took it in a different direction. With episode 1, with Peggy Carter becoming, getting the super soldier serum, the plot didn't change all that much from the normal Captain America story. So it was just okay. It was a woman Captain America, which is great. It's cool. I mean, Haley Atwell was great as the. Well, let me rephrase that. Sometimes Haley Atwell was great, and sometimes you can tell that she's not used to voice acting, and some of the one-liners sounded really out of place. And that was kind of a problem I had overall with that first episode, is that the best voice actor in there was the only one who didn't reprise their role, which was Josh Keaton as Steve Rogers. But like I said, not that much change. This with T'Challa and Star-Lord, they brought in different characters that actually drastically changed something that happened in the MCU.
Yes. And you know what? We might as well call this a wrap for tonight, because you literally just said the main point that I was going to focus on. That between the two episodes, the second one is so much better because of that exact point. It's like the What If comic, what was the most exciting thing about it was to see how dramatically different the world would become based on one key difference, right? One little slight altering of the timeline. And like you said, the first episode is pretty much a recount of the first Avenger movie, and it's just, instead of Steve Rogers, you have Peggy Carter. And the story beats are kind of the same. Some of the dialogue is the same. The second one is like you get like a little bit of a crack, and then it goes off in a different direction, and the whole universe is different.
Yeah. One thing I would say is that I was actually a little disappointed in the first episode. There was a point where the scene where they go into the train, where in the first Avenger, Bucky falls and gets, frozen or whatever happens to him. And they kind of revert that. And it seems like that Steve is taking the place there. So my mind went to, oh, shit, is Steve going to be the Winter Soldier? I mean, it doesn't make sense because he's a scrawny little kid, but I was hoping for some kind of twist like that, and they didn't give it to me.
Yeah.
And I think that would have been a spot that would have worked really well to change things, but they didn't take that route. I will say that I kind of enjoyed and I think a lot of the internet enjoyed the kind of reverse romance thing. Not reverse, but typically it's the big strong man and the damsel in distress sort of thing, but it's like reversed, and it's giant Peggy Carter and scrawny little Steve. I liked that. I appreciated that a lot. But that was really the only thing that was kind of different, I guess.
Yeah.
I mean, they had the Tesseract. They had it. They were using it, and all they did was make an Iron Man suit.
Yeah, that is true. Yeah, that part was really weird. And then what really confused me was, doesn't the Red Skull have the Tesseract after that big explosion on the train?
Yeah, because it was in the Iron Man suit, well, the Hydra Stomper suit, so that's how he gets it.
Oh, okay.
But it's they have this thing, which they didn't have it in the movie,
right?
And that's all they could do was build an Iron Man suit.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting, right? Because the showrunner of the show is AC Bradley, right? And she wrote that first episode that we keep talking about. There was a different writer for the second episode. His name was Matthew Chauncey, right? But AC Bradley is the overall showrunner, and so she's in charge of every episode. And I felt like when it comes to these kind of shows, it's probably that they, as a team, break down what's going to happen in each episode, and then the person that's listed as the writer is probably just the person that's like writing the dialogue and like just the action beats, right?
Yeah.
And I felt like if she's the showrunner and she's talking about the potential, it's weird that like the first episode is so close to the vest, and it's even like, well, they have the Tesseract, like you said, but all they do is just make an Iron Man suit. Like they don't go all crazy. And I wonder if that's the reason why they put that episode first, because it's like, oh, well, remember this? You remember the First Avenger? This is our chance to kind of go back and enjoy it again, but we're not going to go too crazy. Whereas in the second one, they start to go a little off the rails.
So one of the thoughts that I had, because obviously they ended the episode with Peggy, instead of being frozen, she gets trapped in another dimension. She comes out approximately the same time that Steve came out of the ice. Yeah. And she's greeted by Nick Fury and Hawkeye. So do we see more of these? Do we see a continuation of these? Are these going to come together to form, like, are we going to see 5 of these episodes come together and then have a retake of the Avengers movie?
Oh my God, that would be so awesome. I'm trying to think if there's any content by the second episode where, because of what happened in the first episode, it's like clearly they're not the same world, right? And the second one, because it's in space and because the Earth stuff is in Wakanda, it's like really far removed from the Avengers stuff. So
I mean, I feel like you see that. I've seen clips of that that classic shot of the camera spinning around the Avengers team, but it's all different characters. It looks like, I'm pretty sure at least Star-Lord T'Challa is there, and I think Peggy was there, and I think I saw a different Thor. I could be, maybe I'm dreaming this. I don't know. I have no idea. But yeah. I feel like I can see it in my head.
Yeah. Well, I think that with this, because there's another thing too, when I was doing research about the show, is that they already have season 2, like it's in development. So like they're moving forward. They're dedicated to this, and there's 9 episodes of this. What you're saying, it almost seems like it's like the perfect kind of setup for an Exiles TV show, right? Where it's like a team of all these different realities. The only reason why I think it's not just one reality where they're all just going to come together like the Avengers is because I think that kind of contradicts the idea of the show of there being like multiple realities.
True, very true.
If it was like Exiles where they're all from different realities and they all come together, that'd be really cool.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it would definitely be a different take than the classic What If comics, because for the most part, they're just one-offs. That's it. It's just, the story is 30 pages or whatever it is. Yeah. That's it.
Yeah.
20 pages. 20 pages.
I think a standard comic is like 20 pages and then like maybe 22.
Well, back then they were a little longer, I think. They were probably like 24 pages, something like that. They keep shortening our comics.
Yeah, no kidding. Yeah, what the hell, man? Yeah. So what I was going to say was, with the behind-the-scenes stuff, it's interesting, the people, because at this point, I feel like Marvel could just pick and choose who they want to be working on these shows, right? Everyone wants to work on these things. And so AC Bradley, that I mentioned before, she was a main writer on, like Guillermo del Toro had a couple of Netflix shows. One was called Troll Hunters.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So she was a writer.
My son randomly just watched the end movie of it all.
And so
I'm like, who are these people? But yeah.
Well, with that being said, they did like almost like their own kind of Avengers with that, where they had like different shows.
It was cool. Yeah, you could definitely see there's very different characters all coming together to fight the same common enemy.
Yeah,
like those giant elementally totemy guys, whatever you want to call them.
Right, which is so cool because it's like Guillermo, and so it's sort of like Pacific Rim. I wanted to watch that, but so she was a writer on that show, and then also the Matthew Chauncey guy. He wrote for one of those shows, Three Below, and then the director of all the episodes. Because with these Marvel shows, it seems like there's like multiple writers, one main writer, obviously, and then like the same director for every episode. And so for this series, the director is a guy named. I'm sorry, I wrote it down. I could just find it real quick. No, not shit. I'm sorry, I can't find the director's name, but the director is a guy that has done like storyboards for Marvel movies, and he's been the art director. He was a guy like an artist on the Clone Wars show. Remember like the Samurai Jack Clone Wars show?
The one that were the shorts.
Yeah.
Oh man, that was good stuff. I remember those. Yeah.
Yeah. So the guy that's the director of all these episodes worked on that.
Interesting. Okay.
And then he would like do the storyboards and shit for some of our favorite MCU movies too.
Okay.
So I think that like people aren't necessarily fans of the actual animation style itself, but I do think that like it looks like the whole world looks good.
Yes, as I mentioned in many previous episodes, that I typically don't like CG animated cartoons because they end up having this kind of like lifeless world that don't have enough characters in there and background. They reuse a lot of doubles. I feel like these shows aren't doing that. They're pretty good. I mean, and the action scenes are actually really good. They're really well choreographed and they look like, somewhat believable. It's not like too exaggerated, but they were good.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of this one Star Wars show called Resistance. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
I feel like the animation is very similar to that. Where is that like a computer animated cell, but it just looks like regular 2D animation?
Yeah, it's basically just cell shading on a CG show. Yeah.
Okay. I don't know. Especially in the second episode where it's in the sort of the galactic kind of setting, I think it worked really well. A lot of different colorful characters.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, I have a list of points that, I want us to kind of have a structure now. And so my next category is controversy. Now, I feel like this show, besides the animation, there's a little bit of complaint about the actual animation, but I didn't really feel like there's any kind of complaints. Did you see anything?
The only complaint I saw that was sort of related was there was a little bit of a tiff over the Captain America Twitter account.
Oh yeah, right.
People were angry that they kind of rebranded it as Captain Carter when they just recently changed it to Sam Wilson.
Yeah,
so people were a little up in arms now, but I believe they've already turned that around.
Oh yeah.
So and other than that, I mean, obviously the episode 2 just came out today, so I haven't read anything bad about it, but I can't imagine anything being bad about it. So
yeah, there was one thing I kind of was thinking about it, which is that you're sort of inadvertently making it like characters that are not white men could do a better job than the white male characters. And I don't have a complaint about that. It's because the paradigm is that the majority of these characters are white men to begin with and have been for decades. And so now this show is giving it a chance for other versions of these characters to take place. Peggy Carter, it's a woman. It's going to be Captain America, or in this case, Captain Carter. And then T'Challa, he's from Africa. And when you see the end of that second episode, Peter Quill is just working in a Dairy Queen, right?
Yes. You know what though? I'm okay with that. Is at least in the frame of this episode, I absolutely believe T'Challa would do a better job at everything than Peter Quill would. I mean, it's just showing that Peter Quill was kind of like a slacker rebel, and T'Challa was just hardworking. I mean, I think that's very fitting for both their characters.
Yes.
So I mean, I really enjoyed that first scene of it where, oh my God, what's his name?
Yondu?
Not Yondu, the hunter guy.
Yeah. That is Korath.
Korath. Yeah, when Korath walks in, he's like, "You're Starlord." Like, just flipping that on the head was. I actually really enjoyed that. Although I think they took it maybe a little too far in that scene, like dragged on a little too long.
Agreed.
Yeah, and it was just interesting to see that someone with a real drive and a different outlook can just change the universe. And yeah, it definitely seemed like it was like, oh, he made everything better. And I agree that he probably would make everything better, but at the same time, I feel like one of the main components of What If Comics is that usually something goes tragically wrong.
Right.
And we haven't seen that at all really yet.
No.
They sort of hinted at it a little bit with the little tag at the end of the episode where Ego shows up to talk to Peter in the Dairy Queen or whatever it was.
Yeah.
So and they imply that something trouble is coming or something like that. But I mean, I'm used to this some event going so horribly wrong and like tons of people die and these people have to rise in their place. And so far it's just been like a happy switcheroo rather than the darker story that I'm expecting.
Man, that is a really, really good point. I think I was sitting there waiting for the other shoe to fall because we are so used to these what if comics where there is a dark fate usually. It's like, oh, this little twist. And it's been a positive fate. And so I think that like the kind of the point that I was making before, if you look at it, Peggy Carter in the MCU has been established as this very tough woman, very smart, very capable, right? And she's always been kind of held back by the patriarchy, and she like made S.H.I.E.L.D. essentially, right? And then T'Challa, whether it's the T'Challa of the MCU or it's T'Challa of the comics, T'Challa is ridiculously competent. Like in the comics, he's like Batman, to where he's just like always like 5 steps ahead of everyone, super intelligent. So of course T'Challa is going to have a much more positive effect on the universe than Peter Quill, who is known as kind of like a slacker and into, you know, his kind of vices and stuff, right? So when you kind of pair them up, of course, T'Challa is going to have a much more positive effect than Peter Quill. But what I didn't like about that first episode as much was that Steve Rogers is such a dedicated, courageous character. And if you watch that first Avenger movie where it goes almost beat by beat like this episode, Steve has problems. Like he loses Bucky and he has to go be in the SOU tour or whatever the hell that is, right? So Steve kind of has trouble, whereas Peggy kind of comes in, and there's that term that everybody uses on the other side where they always talk about like the Mary Sue, right? And I think that like Peggy throughout the whole episode is just this amazing badass. She's like jumping through planes and stuff and knocking people out and can't seem to mess up at all. And the only time that she really messes up is that ambush on the train. And so I understand that T'Challa kind of eclipsing Peter Quill, but with the Peggy eclipsing Steve Rogers, that just kind of rubbed me the wrong way. But that being said, I completely understand Peggy Carter being successful. I completely understand T'Challa being successful.
Yeah, no, that's what I said. Like they didn't deviate enough in that first episode, and I think, like I said, had they went some kind of route where, you know, Steve was just gone from the episode then, and then they revisited it later, you know, in some kind of Winter Soldier like twist, that would have been a lot better, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. And so maybe there will be repercussions, and maybe we still will see that lineup that you were talking about where it's like that Avengers team of these different I would love to see that, honestly.
Yeah. That would definitely add an extra layer of interest to the show.
Yeah. So another thing I put on here was to talk about similarities between the episodes that we just watched and comic books that we've read. Are there any like these obviously draw directly from the movies, but is there any kind of comics that like you've read that kind of remind you of these? And if you don't have examples off the top of your head, I have some too.
I feel like I've already seen a Peggy Carter with Super Soldier Serum in a more recent volume of Exiles, I believe.
Okay.
But other than that, and you know what, that was a world where things happened differently. I mean, I don't exactly remember, but I'm pretty sure something bad happened to Steve in that one. I think, but and I think Bucky was a girl.
Nice.
Too. I don't remember exactly, but yeah, that was a little more varied. And other than that, though, I mean, because these are more so following the blueprint of the MCU. I don't necessarily think that either episode really follows any particular comic that closely. So they're really just following the movies rather than the comics.
Good point. There are things that like thematically remind me of comics, but I think it's just because the movies come from the same source. And I wonder if the thing that you were referencing with Peggy and the super soldier serum was Spider-Gwen, because in her reality,
yes, that's right. It's an African-American woman who is the Captain America in that universe. No, but there wasn't a newer Exile series, and Blink was in it again.
Okay.
And it had like a Kamala Khan, almost like a Cable kind of person. It had a younger. Was it Nathaniel Richards, or was it a younger Tony Stark? It was some kind of Iron person. And they had you ever see the drawn by Scotty Young, like the little X-Men?
Yeah, of course.
They had the little Wolverine as part of the team.
Oh, okay.
So it was like this little cartoony Wolverine with these like normal looking characters.
Dude, I want to check this out now. This sounds cool.
It was okay.
Yeah.
I think it got canceled or pretty early. I don't know if it even made it past 12 issues.
Okay. Yeah, well, I'm guessing it's on your Comixology, right?
Yes.
Okay, yeah. I'll check that out down the road. But with that being said, like, the Spider-Gwen comic that I was talking about, that kind of has that same kind of dynamic with Gwen Stacy and Peter Parker as like Steve Rogers and Peggy Carter, right? Where like Peter Parker doesn't get bit by that spider, Spider-Gwen does, and then she has the power, she's the hero, and he's like kind of just following her around, and he always kind of feels like not as much of a man or whatever, and he ends up becoming like
the lizard.
What happens?
He becomes the lizard.
Right. He becomes a lizard, and that's like one of those negative side effects, right? So the first episode kind of reminded me of that a little bit, and then with the Star-Lord one with T'Challa, there was a recent run with Ta-Nehisi Coates' Black Panther series where it was like it took place in outer space. It was like the Wakandan Empire of space, and so it was like kind of like Star Wars meets Black Panther. And that reminded me a little bit of this episode that we just watched too, which I recommend both of those series, Spider-Gwen and that Ta-Nehisi Coates run too.
I've read a decent amount of that Spider-Gwen, and there are a lot of differences in that series that I find very interesting. Like Matt Murdock is a lawyer for the Kingpin. He's like a bad guy. Frank Castle is this grizzled old police detective. We already mentioned the Captain America. What else is there that's really good about that? I can't think of anything else.
Well, and her dad is like still alive, and he has this like much more interesting role than he did in the comics, in the Spider-Man comics.
He's still kind of Ghost Spider, I guess she's known in universe.
Yeah.
He does eventually find out. But early on he does know.
Yeah, it's got this kind of like Commissioner Gordon, Batgirl kind of vibe to it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the last point I had was like kind of future episodes and ties into the MCU. And the one thing that got me really excited about the MCU was in the second episode, they go to the collector's base or whatever, his shop, his museum, and he takes out all these items where he's going to fight T'Challa, right? And he takes Hela's crown and he says, oh, she has a necro sword. Now, you know what that is, right?
Yes, I do.
Yeah. And so do you want to just explain to people who don't know what that is?
God, why am I blanking now? The necro sword is... Oh, God. It's not... It's the sword that... Is it the weapon that Gore the God Butcher uses?
Yup.
Yes.
Yeah, so with the necro sword, what's super interesting about that for the comics, okay, so if you guys remember, in Thor Ragnarok, Hela is just always throwing blades. Like, she just immediately has blades. And there's a character in the comics that Brian just mentioned called Gore the God Butcher, and he's in this run of Thor written by Jason Aaron, and he just goes around killing gods. And who's he going to be played by in the next Thor movie?
Christian Bale.
Oh man, that's going to be so fucking awesome.
Yeah.
And so there's even more potential to that because in the comics, we eventually learn that his kind of black sword that he's always able to throw and stuff is actually the weapon that was used by a character known as Null, who is the god of symbiotes in Marvel Comics. And so like Venom and Carnage and all those characters come from him. So it's kind of cool that they like name dropped the Necro Sword in this show because they didn't mention it in Thor Ragnarok. And
True,
so it just kind of like alludes to all of this stuff.
Yeah. And some other interesting things in that little cabinet he had. I mean, you actually saw Mjolnir in there. You saw Captain America's shield.
Right.
Some other weapons and stuff too. So, I mean, maybe something bad did happen in this world. They just didn't tell us.
Yeah. Well, he also have like an arm from like that guy. What was his name? Korg. That Taika Waititi played.
Yes, he seemed like he had Korg's arm, and T'Challa even picks it up and uses it for a second.
Yeah. I think we should just mention too, while we're kind of going into that part, that episode was so good with the way that they used like characters from Guardians of the Galaxy and Thor and Infinity War, right?
Yes. I was actually very surprised at the turn of Thanos. I thought that was very interesting. And I mean, I can see how that's kind of like stretching the limit of T'Challa is great there because he literally convinced a genocidal maniac to not commit genocide.
Yeah.
Which is it's both funny and a little far-fetched, but I mean, I really like the role Thanos played in this episode, especially when he starts charging down the
Black Order.
The Black Order towards the end to let everybody escape. That was awesome.
Oh my God, so good, so good. Sometimes when they have these kind of alternate reality shows, you'll see a good character become a bad character, right? And like you'll see like a big brute like that become this kind of mean conqueror. So it's really cool to see the inverse where it's like this like ridiculously evil main bad guy is now this sort of, conscientious bruiser good guy. And it's interesting because Nebula, his adopted daughter, is in this, but it just seems like she just had an eye replaced, and that was it, right?
Yes, it was interesting to see her with hair.
Yeah,
yeah. So she still had somewhat of a difficult background. I'm curious as to where Gamora was in all this. I mean, it's possible that Thanos never attacked her planet, so therefore you never adopted her. But at the same time, you never really knew if he met Gamora or Nebula first.
Yeah. It got a little hazy as to like what happened in the timeline, especially with Thanos, right? Because Korath, right? I think he was serving Ronan.
He mentioned Ronan, yeah.
Right, and he went to go get the thing which had an Infinity Stone in it, and so Thanos was the one that was prompting Ronan to find it. So it's like Ronan, I guess, still wanted that Power Stone regardless.
Well, it just seems I imagine that Ronan was working for the Collector because he was interested in the stone.
Okay.
No, yeah. He wanted T'Challa. He didn't want the stone.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, that kind of got me thinking here. Back to my theory about something combining into a what if Avengers.
Sure.
I mean, we've had 2 episodes, and they're both based on movies that featured an Infinity Stone.
Yeah.
So, I mean, maybe there will be some kind of culmination of the Infinity Gauntlet again during this series.
Yeah. That would be really cool. Yeah. And who would wield it too? That's the real interesting part. Like, I know that Peter Parker is gonna like have like Doctor Strange's like cloak at one point, right? It looks like he's gonna have Doctor Strange's powers, right?
Yeah, it sounds like that's gonna be the zombie episode.
Okay.
Where I mean, which to me, my mind immediately went to what if Wolverine was Lord of the Vampires?
Yeah.
Where Doctor Strange gets killed, because Wolverine makes everybody vampires, and he teams up with the Punisher via his astral form, and the Punisher uses his cloak to help him kill Wolverine.
Oh yeah, it'll be something like that. Yeah, I can see that.
But going to that, so that's a very dark issue. Obviously, you know, most of the X-Men are either dead or vampires, and then even the hero of the story, who is the Punisher, dies.
Yeah. Doesn't like Wolverine cut off like Kitty Pryde's head too in that comic?
Something like that. It's pretty. I mean, when I read that, I was like 10 or 11 or something like that. So
yeah.
Pretty messed up. That's probably why it stuck with me so much.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure that you know, Frank Castle dies, and I think Wolverine like turns around or something. He ends up curing everybody instead or something. I don't remember. I have to go read it again.
Yeah,
but I definitely remember that the Punisher died.
Yeah. Well, you know, if he's doing the whole thing where he's like using Doctor Strange's powers, he's probably going to have the time stone, right?
Yeah. So there you go. So that's
so there
three.
you go. So that's another Infinity gem or stone. Then yeah, man. So I just liked it in general, and then like Drax, his family didn't get killed, right? Because they were able to stop Ronan's invasion. So that's all positive right there. I'm assuming that, like, because you were asking before about Gamora, then I'm assuming that, like, Thanos just never had that whole thing where he was, like, wiping out half of a population. So her planet was probably fine. Then Howard the Duck showed up, which was pretty great, voiced by Seth Green.
Yep.
That's great. I am digging it way more with episode 2 versus episode 1. And I'm just kind of looking forward to see what the next one's going to hold.
Yeah, I have to say too that I commented on the voice acting of episode 1, and I felt some of the actors weren't used to voice acting because it is definitely different than acting.
Yeah.
And I thought overall the voice acting was a lot better in the second episode. Some of those people have done it before. I mean, and it definitely sounded like there weren't many replacements. I think Drax was not Dave Bautista.
Right.
That was a little bit of a Twitter controversy. Somebody asked him about that, and he said he was never asked.
Right.
But I guess it was such a small part that maybe they didn't need him.
Yeah, it's weird, though, with the small parts, right? Because Drax and Peter Quill were not voiced by the original actors, right? And then, of course, Captain America in the first one, too. But then, like, for the Black Order, you have, like, an actress like Carrie Coon playing, what the hell's the girl in the Black Order? That
Proxima Midnight?
Yeah, Proxima Midnight. Carrie Coon, who's this, like, actress that's kind of a bigger name now. She's grown. She I think she had, like, 2 lines,
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, that Benicio del Toro and Josh, and even, like, Kurt Russell just shows up.
Was that Benicio del Toro? It didn't sound like it. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And friggin' that was Kurt Russell at the very end, too.
Wow. It's definitely a little weird here. Wow. Yeah. That really was everybody.
Yes. So, like, what got me the most, though, was just that Chadwick Boseman was T'Challa, and it was just really great to hear his character and just kind of see his character have this, like, big positive influence on the universe. And
yeah, it's definitely a nice send-off to him, yeah. And they had the nice dedication at the end as well.
Yeah, I almost cried when I was watching it. Cool, man. Well, I think that's a wrap for episodes 1 and 2 of What If. Do you know which one is the third episode?
I do not.
Okay. So we got something to look forward to and kind of speculate about. But you got a good feeling about the series or what?
I'm liking it so far. And like I said, if they connect these in some way in an Exiles-like fashion, I think it'll be really interesting and unique. But at the same time, I do want to see some darker consequences to these alterations. To make me kind of feel like the comics do.
Hell yeah. I agree with you on that one. Brian and I are going to be talking about this show. There's 9 episodes. It's actually going to take us all the way to October. That's pretty crazy. and so I think we're going to move the time period up too, because Brian and I have children, and everyone's going back to school. Summer's over. So we're going to be around at 9 p.m. Central Time, 10 p.m. Eastern Time for you guys. And we will see you guys again next Wednesday.